and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we branch out from our Atomic Age Horror Retrospective into 1950s teenage horror with I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, co-author of California Tiki, coming this August, really just a couple weeks, from the History Press. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running indie comic Halloween Man, and coming July, that's out this month
It's
Comics.
now. It's out.
Yeah,
Go to
it's out.
Go
Yes,
buy it right now.
from
Lucy
Comixology
Chaplin.
and Sugar Skull Media. Yes, tell us the title.
Lucy Chaplin, Science Starlet. Well reviewed, I might add. Not a negative review yet, which I keep waiting for. I keep waiting for the negative review. So go read it and put a negative review on my Facebook group, but I still win because I'll have your money.
Yes. Congratulations, by the way. So yes, that's out. And finally, also in Denver, as always, color commentary from the one and only attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello, Julia.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. First of all, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. I know everybody's been busy. It's been a couple of weeks. I don't know what everybody's been up to per se, but I know that we've spent a fair amount of time in the mountains and being frightened by the Stanley Hotel. So I'm super happy to be back. And okay, I Was a Teenage Werewolf is a 1957 horror film starring Michael Landon as a troubled teenager, Yvonne Lime, and Whit Bissell. Whit Bissell, who was in Creature from Black Lagoon. It was co-written and produced by cult film producer Herman Cohen, and was one of the most successful films released by American International Picture. This thing made many times AIP's investment, and a lot of it owes to, no doubt, to Michael Landon and a killer title. So
Also directed by the same person who directed I Married a Monster from Outer Space.
Wow, no, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And that that movie is such a paranoid movie. This one has a lot of serious elements in it. That kind of makes sense. Beautiful black and white, by the way. So let's get our opening thoughts. Julia, we haven't opened with you in a while, so let's go Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll say whatever, and then we'll get into this film. Julia, opening thoughts. I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
I'm gonna say that I don't like this film, and it's not because it's not well made or because it's not well acted, but I found it just really depressing and just like dark. I mean, the theme of this kid who's troubled, who then goes to against his better judgment, against his will, really, ends up going to this quote unquote doctor who's actually a mad scientist who then turns him into a worse monster. I mean, it was such a huge metaphor for like people who are abused by trusted figures, by teachers, by children, I should say, who are abused by, teachers, parents, doctors, ministers, whoever, and then they ruin their lives, or in this case, worse. I was so depressed by it. I didn't like it at all. I didn't like the gimmick. I didn't like how the werewolf's origin story happens. It just bothered me. But it wasn't, like I say, because it wasn't a good film. It was just not it was really upsetting to me.
Okay, excellent. That's a place to start. We have right off the bat a downvote. Tony, what are your thoughts on I Was a Teenage Werewolf?
I like it. I think it can be a little uneven at times. It is really dark. Great performances, especially for a film of this era, especially with there's so many knockoffs that are way cheesier.
Mm-hmm.
I think it also leads to there's a whole, I forgot what movie it is too, where the psychology of the werewolf has been discussed in a lot of movies in kind of our era of movies. And I think this is probably where people start with this. Of course, Universal's werewolf movies, but this one's directly psychologically linked. He goes to a doctor and all of this terrible stuff happens. So I think a lot of people might start with this or remember this even if they're psychoanalyzing, other werewolf movies. It was kind of cool to see Michael Landon so young.
Yeah.
And I like to imagine, I was telling Rain, when he's going under sedation, I like to imagine that those times where he's under sedation, that's where we get Little House on the Prairie. So Little House on the Prairie is just this sedation dream.
Yes.
Or Highway to Heaven, even more so.
Or Highway to Heaven, either one. But I just because it's such he's regression therapy during this, so it would make more sense that it was Little House.
Oh, he went to a past life. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's totally a good point.
Well, but the Highway to Heaven thing could be one of his his angel life when
Of course. Or maybe his death as a werewolf leads to his angel nature of Highway to Heaven. It all funnels back to I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Well, and there's a callback to this film in Highway to Heaven where there was an episode that Michael Landon actually directed and wrote called I Was a Middle-Aged Werewolf, where he turns himself into a werewolf, and then they actually watch this movie, and while he's watching it, the other character goes, the guy in the movie really reminds me a lot of you. I mean, when he's regular guy, not when he's got fuzz all over his face. And then Michael Landon says something about how he was never that young or whatever.
He was never that young.
Oh, that was cute.
I came across that episode once. I was on a writing retreat, and there were only a couple stations available, and I came in on that episode of Highway to Heaven, because that's all you can really catch in like BFE Oklahoma is basically like one ratty station, and it's showing reruns of Highway to Heaven all day.
Strangely, there is also a werewolf episode of Little House on the Prairie, although I don't think they make any fun callbacks to this movie in that.
Are you serious?
I am completely serious.
All right, first of all, it's your turn for your opening thoughts, but you got to tell me more about this Little House on the Prairie episode. And
I will post a link to it. I don't remember it well enough because I have not revisited it in my adult life because I don't like Little House on the Prairie that much. But I remember the episode, and I did not imagine it. I've Googled it as an adult because there was that moment. It's like, did I imagine that there was a werewolf episode of Little House on the Prairie? There totally is. I will post a link to an episode synopsis.
There are some disturbing ass episodes of Little House on the Prairie. I'm serious. I mean, there are some that there was one that was about this serial murderer rapist guy who wore a porcelain mask. There was some strange stuff in Little House. Anyway, people don't necessarily remember, but okay,
Reed and I rewatched the whole series, or I watched most of it. I don't know if I watched every episode.
Am I wrong about that?
Oh no, there's all kinds of stuff. I also learned never to haul dynamite. If you see somebody hauling dynamite in one of those shows, that person's gone. Anyway, not that it has anything to do with werewolves, but I'll have to revisit that as well because Rain and I watched that. I don't remember the werewolf thing.
In the song Convoy by C.W. McCall, don't they refer to dynamite haulers as suicide jockeys? I seem to remember that. And so then they got something like 11 long-haired friends of Jesus in a chartreuse microbus. And so what they do is they arrange to have the Jesus freaks behind the suicide jockey just for luck. Drew, opening thoughts. What are we talking about? I Was a Teenage
Werewolf. I have not seen this movie in a very, very long time, but I love werewolf movies, so I was really happy to talk about it. I actually, for a lot of the things that Julia does not like about it, I really like this movie. I like how dark it is. I think Michael Landon is very magnetic as this angry teen. The idea of tying werewolfery with into psychology, of course, nicely evolves into The Howling, which is a movie I love a lot. I love the design of the werewolf makeup. I love all the business of like the 50s teens hanging out and performing for each other. And, there's just so much that I like about this movie. I think it's got a great aesthetic. It's a lot of fun to watch. Fun might not be the right word. It is very downbeat, but I think that's appropriate because is there any monster in the classic monster canon that is more inherently sad than the werewolf? Like it is a.
That's true, but you can have it be a silly or even a sweet, like, Oz from Buffy is a really sweet character. He's not, yeah, it's sad that he loses control of his, emotions and has to be locked up for a while, but it's not like he's not a great, it doesn't ruin his life.
Yeah,
so.
but here's the thing. Buffy was in a lot of ways more of a superhero show than it was in some ways than a straight horror show, or at least a fantasy. This is horror, and this is taking the werewolf as a metaphor for anger, and the sort of anger you feel as a teenager. And I think that's an incredibly appropriate use for this mythology, and I think that it's very interesting here. In fact, my only real complaint about this movie is I wish it could be a little bit longer. I know that was not like the style of movies at this time, but like I think I would have enjoyed a bigger confrontation between him and the doctor, because I just found the whole dynamic so interesting. So it was really fun and interesting to revisit this movie, and I think that there's a lot of good talking points here. And again, always happy to watch a werewolf movie.
Well, and I would have liked it a lot better if it ended differently, but we'll get to that later.
That's really interesting. I just want to make my quick note. To me, this is a super important film. I'm kind of shocked that we never did it, although I love that we're doing it as part of this sort of mid-century retrospective. And it'll be cool to do it in the context with the other films in this cycle, the Frankenstein and the sort of female remake of this movie, which is called Blood of Dracula, but it's basically the same movie, only all female. And I love this. I love the look. I love the sort of hot rod culture. Well, there's no hot rods, but I love this sort of the 50s kids and their dances, their Halloween party. This movie, even though poor Michael Landon is miserable, it makes me extremely happy. I should also mention that it, in a way, to me, calls back to The Werewolf of London, because that one also, there was all kinds of like pseudoscientific explanations for werewolfery and that sort of went away to the completely supernatural concepts. I didn't see Cry of the Werewolf from the 40s, but the whole main universal cycle, we know how that went, and it was very superstitious. And now we're back in the realm of science fiction.
Although they do pay homage to the Universal werewolf movies with the Transylvanian immigrant.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, and gosh, Guy Williams, Zorro's in this. I mean, it's neat. It was. I really, really enjoyed this. I'm shocked in a way that we had never gotten around to seeing it. So yes, so let's get into it. But we should start out with the concept that this movie is really a mesh of two different kinds of films, or maybe more than that. But to begin with, you've got a troubled youth kind of film that typically would involve. What's going on here is that Tony, played by young and handsome Michael Landon, is, we're told, a very good student. He gets good grades, but he is troubled and he gets into fights all the time. He doesn't like to be approached from behind or touched, and he'll lash out. And
he expresses that he doesn't know why he does that. Like he doesn't understand it. And I've actually had that conversation with my own teenager when she has said, I don't know why I act this way, or I'm acting this way, that I acted the way that I did. And I'm like, yeah, I can remember that. I mean, and sometimes I still feel that way as an adult, but I think as a teenager, it's just a lot more intense, where you just have these, the anger, the bursts of anger, like you were saying, Drew.
absolutely.
Well, he also has. I
yeah.
also think it's important that he lost his. We don't never know why, but he's lost his mother.
Yes.
And I think that
And
there's
that bothers
something
me.
underlining.
It bothers me that we
Why?
don't get more of that backstory. I
Ah,
would have liked to have heard more about what happened with the mom, because it's really just kind of dismissed with a one line. And I really think it would have helped me to know more about his backstory and to have a completely different ending.
I laugh because I have a feeling we're gonna keep coming back to that. You would have been happier with this film if it just
Had
I
stopped like
agree with you. That I would have liked more detail on what happened to the mom, but that's not really the style. I think that's because of when this movie was made. This is the style of the movie. Men, the fact that we have men talking about their feelings as much as they are is actually kind of progressive in
Yeah.
a way. But you're not going to get much more than we have. But I agree with you. I think that I would have liked to know more of that, because I think that there's a lot of meat there that could have made for interesting fodder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what would normally happen in a troubled youth movie like this, you would have exactly what happens here, which is that he's acting out. People are telling him, "Hey Tony, you're a little wild. Hey baby, I don't know why I do the things I do." And she's like, "That's okay, Tony. You can abuse me as much as you like. It's all right." And then he finally kind of goes a little too far. He knocks his girlfriend over. His girlfriend is so sweet. If you were to, by the way, draw the cliched, like World of Forms Aristotelian vision of a 1957 girlfriend, it looks like the girlfriend that he has here. This sort of apple-cheeked, platinum blonde, sweet girl with the good home and whatever. Anyway,
The concerned parents.
yes, and before we get to the snapping, I should mention we follow him to fussing around with his pals. So we get very early in this movie, before there's any werewolves or anything like this, we get a whole set piece that takes place in the gang's clubhouse. And the gang's clubhouse, to me, is one of those things that I can't remember if this is something that Stephen King spends a lot of time with in Dance Macabre, but I want to say that he did. Like that he was personally very moved by the concept that teenagers were like hanging out in clubhouses and telling jokes and dancing. I had a smile 1,000 miles wide when I was watching these scenes. I love
Well,
this whole stuff.
I mean, obviously Stephen King has a lot of affection for this movie because he references it in it.
I remember a little bit about that. Tell
Yeah.
me about that more. Like they
Well,
actually discuss it in that book, right?
Pennywise becomes a werewolf, and specifically he becomes the teenage werewolf.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, this is like, I think you're probably right in thinking that this movie was a big deal to Stephen King.
They apparently they do discuss. I haven't read it, so I do need to read it. Apparently, um, Pennywise does turn into the character, but apparently they all do discuss it. I'd love to read what Stephen King's critique of "I Was a Teenage Werewolf" is, because that sounds fabulous. Also, weirdly, we as the audience, imagine if you will, this is an American International Picture movie, so it's showing in the drive-in. You've gotten to watch it with your pals. So the in jokes and the humor and everything is aimed squarely at that teenage audience. So the things that they find funny might not make sense to us at all. And I was experiencing a weird sort of vertigo because I was like, I know that what they're talking about is supposed to be important, but I'm not getting it. And that's okay. I'm like a stranger in a strange land. It's fine. But for instance, a couple of the kids at the Halloween party that they go to go on about how this party is much cooler than at the fellowship hall, which no doubt it is. That where because they're carefully supervised and they only do square dances and stuff like that. And it's really dorky. And I was thinking, you're choosing to spend time giving us this dialogue, right? You're devoting screen time to this. So therefore you think, because these guys are not known for wasting time in AIP, you think that this is going to be something that will really resonate with your teenage audience. That yes, hanging out in your self-chaperoned party is more cool than hanging out at your community center or your fellowship hall. But I just thought it was really wild. It gave me a brief glimpse into into life for these kids. Was there
Well, and
anything
this is
else
Well,
about
why I
this?
say that
Yeah.
this is why I say that it's disappointing to me that we don't get more backstory about Tony's mom and his childhood, because we get tons of backstory about their relationship. Like there's a lot of good
yeah,
relationship
but
building
it won't.
between all these
I
young
don't.
people.
Sorry, I don't know if it'd make a difference though, especially in this time. Like, there's tons of movies where there's a loss of a loved one, parent, and that you get the idea that it shapes it. I don't. For
But
myself,
it
I don't.
doesn't
I
have to
didn't
be a
really need
lot.
it.
Like if you think about like Pretty in Pink, that movie, the John Hughes movie, it's not that they go on and on at length about the mom, but there is a very important scene between Molly Ringwald and her dad where she says, she left us, she we didn't it wasn't
Right.
us, we didn't do anything. She left us. And I just thought that just like there was maybe 3 lines that I felt like added so much to that film, because you really get where that character's coming from, you get where the dad is coming from. And I just feel like it doesn't take a lot, like just like with this, the kids at the clubhouse, it doesn't take a lot to set up, that these kids really care about each other and trust each other. And so for him to turn on them truly is not it's out of his control, because he wouldn't have done that, if he had
Right.
any consciousness of his own.
Hmm.
Because I mean, well, they have the business where he found this. They call it the haunted house, and
Yeah.
they hold up. I guess people know that the kids hang out there, but as long as they're not in trouble, I guess
Yeah.
it's best that I also, when I was thinking, so there's the business with the guy who's I guess they're trying to make a cool rock and roller out of him. He plays the bongos, and he can't be bothered with his girlfriend, or even to acknowledge maybe he wants her as his girlfriend.
Oh
But
man, I
then they
love
do
that
this
stuff. Yeah.
dance. Then they do this dance where she's like, she thought it was a costume party. She's dressed in like this clown costume. And it just made me think like this could have just as easily led. It predates it by a while, but I was like, hey, look, it's 50s Harley Quinn and the Joker. Because the
Yeah.
guy,
Right.
like that couple dressed like that would have made a fantastic Harley Quinn and Joker. But he's
I
far too.
love this whole business of people spontaneously breaking into musical. It reminds me of the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Yeah.
And like I'm like, why are my own dinner parties not quite this epic when I see this?
Well, a
Like,
lot of musicians. I'm not sure either. I guess you just have to give us all instruments. Maybe I'll, have some bongos around. I don't know.
yeah,
So,
bongos are the gateway drug,
so
apparently.
out of curiosity, Rain asked this question. I didn't have a good answer. I need to look it up. Where are we supposed to believe that there were just like, or I mean, were there actually like these kind of almost karaoke records where you just had the backing track and then you would
I
sing
have
over it?
no
Or is
idea.
that a real thing
No,
where they
I
were
don't
just
think. No, I think he's just lip syncing, because he's not well matched with the song. I think he's just lip syncing, and he's kind of messing around, like when Ferris Bueller gets on the float and lip
Those Donkey
syncs
Man.
the Beatles. Well, yeah,
Hmm.
right. Donkey. I think he's just lip syncing and dancing, because yeah, when he first starts singing it, it doesn't look like he's actually matching with
I
it.
thought that they were supposed to, that he was because they go, hey, man, what's his name? Rick? Can't remember. Anyway, he's gonna sing the song, and they obviously want him to look like he's singing. Like there's a thing
Yes.
with that as far as the filmmakers go. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if that was a thing or if it was lip sync. It was just kind of one of those. I didn't
I
have time
understood
to
it
look
to
it
just
up.
be him messing around, just like there's been a lot of movies where the person's lip syncs, but
Sure.
usually it's more obvious because they're lip syncing to like somebody from the opposite gender or something. But anyway, that's
Well,
what I
I mean,
understood it to be.
so I think it's supposed to kind of, I think it's supposed to sort of meld one into the other, because I think in the fiction of the movie, I believe that it's a brand new record that just got, and he knows, and he's going to
Mhm.
perform by lip syncing, and his girlfriend and he are going to do a dance. So that's kind of awesome. But I mean, they could have just as well have accomplished that by having, in a story with Ricky Nelson, he would just like suddenly start singing, and suddenly nobody would be bothered by the fact that he's got amazing backing vocals and all that crap.
Yeah.
Even and this kind of a music break for a movie like this is not unusual at all. It is totally strange, because you would never do it today. Like,
Well,
to
especially not
have
in a horror film now.
no, no, right. You you would never have like you might have diegetic music where the characters go in to a like a nightclub and listen to something, and that could be cool, and
Yeah.
it might prove some point or whatever. I'm thinking of
Twin Peaks,
Yorando.
Buffy. Yeah.
Yeah, but generally speaking, uh, it would just never happen, now. So I don't know. It's good. Oh, wait. Well, actually, come to think of it, there's a music break in one of the Scream movies where the guy sings.
Oh yeah, Scream
Yeah, but
2. I
Scream
think
is
I
meant to
love
be a
you.
parody.
Yeah, he sings "I Think I Love You," but only brief. He only a few bars, if I recall. I mean, so
Well,
uh,
it's meant to be a parody.
yes.
It's meant to
So
be humorous. I think calling parody is a
okay,
different.
well said.
Anyway, that's a whole other movie.
But here the concept at this time is just the movie's kind of a goof at this point. We're in a universe where fun things are going to happen. These kids, you want them to feel like your friends, like people that you would want to hang out with. They feel like people I'd want to hang out with. And then they got one friend who unfortunately is, or I don't know, that's mean, who is our main character, who is like the jerkiest of the group. And he finally realizes that his emotions really are out of control, and he really does need to go see a psychiatrist because he nearly hits the most fun-loving kid in the group, and he knocks over his own girlfriend. Um, and that was just because the person snuck up on him. There's a whole running theme that if bells ring or something loud happens over Michael Landon's shoulder, he goes batshit. So and in a Blackboard Jungle kind of story, when he go or in an after school special kind of story in the 80s, when he goes to see Whit Bissell, the doctor, what you're going to see is a slow transformation to becoming a better student and a better citizen as he becomes aware of his own responsibility and to control his anger and his hormones and yada yada. And except that's what's so clever about this movie. At exactly this point, it goes clean off the rails because the psychiatrist that he goes to is a mad scientist. That is brilliant. That is really truly crazy. And because there's no surprise, because we know what movie we went into, because we saw the poster and we bought our ticket, um, Whit Bissell explains to us his mad scientist plan before he even makes it happen. Drew, do you want to explain Whit Bissell's mad scientist plot?
Well, for some reason that's never really fully expressed, he wants to regress people back to a primal state because he
Right.
thinks it's the only way that humanity can be cleansed or something. Like it is very
Yeah.
his motivations are pretty sketchy. And if the actor wasn't performing so well, honestly, like if they had gotten a lesser actor, I don't think this character would quite work as well. He actually works way better than he should.
Right. And that's part of why I don't like the film, because it makes no sense.
Granted, but he wants he feels that Michael Landon is a perfect subject because he's already dealing with anger issues, and he quote has certain markings on his body, and like that kind of like I've
I missed
always
that entirely. I don't think I even
that's
heard
why
that
he
line.
does the physical examination on him. And I'm whole thing about that is, so if he's regressing him down the evolutionary ladder, why does he turn into a wolf man? Like, wouldn't he turn into a teenage caveman?
Did you not know that we were all werewolves before we were
We're all
humans?
we're all descended from werewolves. Yes.
So this leads me to wonder, is like Michael Landon, like the markings on his body. I'm gonna fanfic out
Okay,
the
go
hell out of
crazy.
this for a
I want to
second.
hear
I'm gonna
whatever the hell you're coming up with,
I've
please.
come up with Teenage Werewolf fan fiction. So Michael Landon maybe is from a offshoot race of humans that descended from wolves. And that's what the legend of werewolves has come from. And maybe the mad scientist, because he's the only one who has this arcane knowledge, when he did the physical examination of Michael Landon's character, he learned this, and he knew, I can trigger him into turning into a werewolf. And this will help my mad scheme of whatever my mad scheme is. But
that's a lot better than the actual reality of the movie.
Well,
that's pretty good.
Whole bit, it's all in there, because if you reach for it, because there is the guy from the Carpathian Mountains, the character who talks about how there are werewolves there. So obviously Michael Landon isn't the only werewolf, but obviously the werewolves in Transylvania are not going to hypnotherapists. So how are they becoming werewolves? Okay, therefore there are people who are just hereditary werewolves.
Yeah.
Well, it could be that something else is happening, like maybe witches are bringing out the werewolf in them or something. Any number of things could be the trigger. But yeah,
well,
but
in Teen Wolf, they're hereditary werewolves. They're it's in the family instead of being bitten or anything like that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Continue. So yes, that is.
I am right.
I agree.
So, yeah.
I like your theory.
Whit Bissell's theory is he's going to.
Since I am the resident werewolf expert, I am glad that you like my theory.
It's a totally good theory, and actually, there's nothing to say that it isn't a werewolf version of a caveman. Like that for instance, he has sent man back to a primordial state where that life is short and you bite into people's necks and stuff. But it could be that also he's a werewolf version of the caveman. We're giving this more thought than the people who made the movie actually gave. I promise you this much. Anyway, his plan is, if he can figure out a way to do this here, then maybe he could replicate it over the earth, and humanity will survive the coming ecological disasters better by regressing to more brutal states. Whatever, fine. But the point is, all right, right off the bat, how freaking tragic is that, and how cynical and how amazing, because that is a pretty damn cynical concept for a movie. Hey, kids who are inclined, if you're like nice middle class white kids from the middle of the country, the whole culture talks to you. You are privileged, and hey, kids, guess what? Here's a nightmare where the authority figures that you have trusted in are actually going to betray you. That's amazing.
Well, that's why I don't, like I say, that's why it bothers me that this film, which is supposed to be, in my opinion, kind of lighthearted, is dealing with something that
Why
is
do you
really
feel like it's supposed to be
dark.
lighthearted?
Because it's a werewolf movie. I mean, it's just, to me, a werewolf movie is just by virtue of being a monster movie supposed to be kind of fun and playful.
Almost
and it's
no werewolf movies we have done on this show are lighthearted.
Yeah. Other than, Teen Wolf, I guess, but I kind of would.
Well, it just struck me as especially dark. And you guys know, like, there's things that just really trigger you. Like, you see it and you go,
sure,
yeah.
This is too much for me. And it's not necessarily like it's not like as a child I had a psychologist that abused me. I mean, it's nothing like that. It's just that it bothers me knowing that is a thing that happens to people, that they're betrayed by people, people that they trust, especially, like, say, young kids. I mean, I've seen so many. I can't tell you, we always have had the good fortune of being in incredibly good school districts for our kids. But every school district that my kids have been in or that I was in, even though they're exceptional, has had some asshole teacher who has messed around with kids or mistreated kids. And I'm like, why? That just bothers me so deeply. So I think that's what it is that I'm triggered by seeing in a film like this somebody who is mistreating a young person, and nobody knows it. And I think that I keep coming back to why I don't like the end, or that I hate the ending, because that guy never gets destroyed. Like, nobody knows in the community who he is. You know what I mean? Like, there's never any this guy was
like he's put it together.
That's true.
You think?
The cop. Oh yeah, because he says I get the feeling that this was probably justice or something like that. That the cop knows that something's hinky with Dr. Frankenstein or whatever he's called.
Like, everything he's doing comes to light.
I agree with you that I would have liked a bigger confrontation. I'm not saying that. I feel, but that again, that is the style of these kind of movies at this time period. Is that like when the monster's dead, the movie's over.
Yeah.
But I think
and they don't give you a big resolution. Sometimes that's dissatisfying. I'm not disagreeing with you that, and, I understand where you're coming from, and it is, of course, you're right not to enjoy a movie, but I think, the fact, personally, I prefer there to be films that deal with this kind of subject matter, even though like like I get why that might not be your cup of tea. I think that's fair.
Well, sometimes it is. I mean, there have definitely been films that we've watched where I've been like, oh, this film really messed with my mind, but it was good. I guess I didn't want that out of this film.
Well, I mean, was it because a lot of the other films we've watched in this series are on the campier side, whereas like this, it's got some melodrama elements to it, but like it is a lot darker than anything that I think that we've, with exception of maybe Invasion of the Body Snatchers or I Married a Monster from Outer Space. Like this is a pretty cynical movie in a lot of ways. And although again, I do go back, I think that's about par for the course for most werewolf movies, because the Wolfman is an inherently doomed character. Like Jonathan Landis has a great way of describing the werewolf, is that it's a guy with terminal cancer, but instead of the cancer killing him, it kills everybody else around him. And I've always felt like that's I think a very important thing to this particular horror icon.
That's a really wonderful analysis from Landis. It's true. I kind of took it for, I would have watched this movie in the afternoons in the 80s, and I do take it for granted that if it's that a monster like this, he's very likely to die in the final minutes of the movie. But I'm really glad though to hear your observations about it, Julia, because that gives us another perspective on it.
Well, it's a better discussion for it too.
Yeah. So anyway, Bissell starts, and he does have a helper so that he can kind of explain his goofy plan.
A reluctant helper, though.
Yes. Yeah, truly. God, what a weak ass schmo this other scientist is, because he's like, well, are you sure you want to do that, Mr. Bissell? I don't know. That doesn't sound very ethical. And he's like, and I quote, he says, "And you call yourself a scientist," which I think that is the origin of that line.
Then he goes, you have been you have been more than an assistant or whatever. He's like, you've been an accomplice. Basically, he's blackmailing him. He's saying, hey, if you try to stop me, I'm gonna implicate you in all this other garbage, that I'm gonna bring you down with me because you've been involved with a lot of bad stuff, is what I got out of that.
God, he's pretty much just like TV's Frank and Dr. Forrester.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
Well, I was actually really surprised because we then watched it. We watched it twice. We watched it once straight, and then we watched the MST version. And I was really surprised nobody ever mentioned Dr. Forrester, but it was because that he wasn't on that episode. It was Pearl, and so I thought for sure they would have said, "Hey, it's Dr. Forrester," but they never said that.
Yeah,
I meant to watch it because the print because you can't get this movie now. We decided and then realized, holy crap, how do we watch it? Luckily we have good video stores. I ended up like the print that's on YouTube, the Mystery Science Theater one, whoever ripped that, looks great. But the actual just print that you can find if you want to watch it sans, your own VHS, which of course we always recommend, it looks terrible. It's like a tiny, blurry mess of print.
It hasn't been released
to see it, but re-release would have been nice.
Absolutely. the reason why the MST3K version looks good is because they had a licensed version to play with to do
Right.
that show, and then the version you're seeing on YouTube of that is people who DVR'd the Sci-Fi Channel and then ripped it, and that's
It looks like a VHS. It's very
it may,
soft and like.
well, actually, come to think of it, it's 20 years ago, so I guess you're totally right. But
Yeah.
but it hasn't been released. It was released on VHS back in the day, and I think Laserdisc, never DVD. So
That's a shame.
bootleg is as good as it gets. I've heard different, it all has to do with money, right? Anthony Rotolo of TV Terror said that that the rights holders were being greedy. I read a similar thing that in the shade that was put on that was that what happened was AIP, after James Nicholson died, Samuel Arkoff owned AIP. He was sick of doing the movie thing. He sold everything from Filmways. So Filmways got the rights. Filmways they sold themselves to Orion. So then Orion then had Teenage Werewolf. Orion went bankrupt, and so that means that whoever Orion sold its properties to has the rights to I Was a Teenage Werewolf, but God knows who that is, and they may have other things to do. Where they're just like, don't bother me with something that's going to make me $200,000. I've got water to poison and whatever it is else that they're going to do. So someone out there has the rights to this movie, but they probably just don't care, honestly. It's sad.
How
It's
dare
sad
they?
because I think
Hey, you
this
mentioned
is an important movie. Go ahead.
It's at the very
you
least a
mentioned
famous movie.
Yeah.
you mentioned Nicholson, and I just wanted to point out that IMDb says that Jack Nicholson was considered for this role, and I'm thinking, how different a movie would it be if
Oh
although I
wow,
suppose
yeah.
as a teenager, Jack Nicholson hadn't really discovered his bizarre Jack Nicholson, acting style yet. So it may not have been that different, but it's funny to think about.
Well, we've seen one. Remember, we saw Nicholson
Yeah,
in The Terror, and that's
that's what I'm
just
saying.
six.
I don't guess he'd be
Yeah.
all that different.
No, he's quite normal. That's 6 years after this, and so he would look super young. I haven't seen Little Shop of Horrors, but I know he's in that, and I think that's from this era. Error. I'm sorry, that was a weird slip. This era.
Your error is not
Hey,
having seen
you
that
said it
movie.
so deliberately. You said it with like such conviction. This error. I was like, wow, it sounded like you really meant to say that. Not sure why.
So, okay, guys, help me
That's
understand the
funny.
next bit because, all right, I can't remember his name, so I'll call him Dr. Bissell. Dr. Bissell, um, hits Michael Landon with the treatment, and it turns Michael Landon into a werewolf. But apparently, it's a time delay. It only happens later when he is hyped up, when his emotions are getting the best of him. And so we see that evening that he attacks one of the teenagers after the Halloween party, and or after just hanging out at the club. It's not the Halloween party night. He attacks one of the teenagers, and so that means that Michael Landon left his doctor's appointment and went out, and I guess you know now his transformations are sort of a ticking time bomb kind of thing. Um, uh, and do I have that right? I mean, it's because apparently Dr. Bissell's never seen the transformation actually take place until the end of the film.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think that's right.
yeah, he's just because it's whenever he is exposed to, I guess in this case, it's less of the moon and more he just kind of hulks out.
Yeah, he hulks out. Yeah, it's like the Incredible Hulk. Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. No, it's more like the Hulk because Hyde is chemically induced. So that is so strange that Whit Bissell has basically unleashed in this patient. Again, thinking about the crazy metaphors at work here, you have a troubled youth. Whit Bissell has taken him in for treatment, and now he has done things to him that are going to. I wasn't trying to make it sound like this sort of the truly abusive crap, but the metaphor is there. He's done all these things, and now as Michael Landon's walking around, he's a ticking time bomb, and then he's going to go off. And we see it happen Next, there's a really interesting and very tragic moment because after that attack, and now the police are interested, you have probably the moment that everybody actually remembers from this movie, which is he has a nice meeting with his principal who says, "Gosh, ever since you've been seeing your psychiatrist, everybody says that you're doing better. You know, your grades are still good, but also you're a great counselor. I think you're gonna have a good shot at getting into college. I'm gonna help you with all that." And he he leaves that meeting.
Female principal, by the way.
Female principal.
Well,
Another
yeah,
way
and
this
at
movie.
first I thought about that, and I went, "Gosh, that's really odd." And then I thought, well, I wonder if they weren't if they were more common than we think they were, because remember that the character in Greece, although it's not actually made in the 50s, that's supposed to be the same time period, and she's also a female principal. So maybe it's just more common than, or just fictionally they wish it was. I don't know.
It did feel sort of outre though for it to be a female principal, since so many of uh, the authority figures in this are very serious minded men. But you know, she's kind. You're doing better. I'm going to recommend you for college. He takes a shortcut through the gymnasium where a Playboy model is guesting as a teenager who's doing her gymnastics routine, and it's true. She
What
is,
makes you say
and
she's a Playboy model?
she is a Playboy model. Or the actress
Oh,
is
really?
the actress is 22 years old. And where can I find what her actual name is? I
Yes,
apologize.
where indeed.
I
Well,
didn't
let's
know.
Google her. Why don't we? Why don't we Google her just to make sure we've got all the details? We haven't bothered, by the way, to look up a single name that we've been talking about, but suddenly this one is really important. Like all the
Dawn.
other ones, we're like, oh, we're gonna call him Dr. Bissell, and we're gonna call this person him, but we have to know her name.
Well, that's what. So after this podcast, that's kind of, you guys can work this out.
Her name is
Why is
Dawn.
this so important? You guys, we'll leave you to it.
This movie came out in July of 1957. Dawn Richard was featured in the May 1957 issue of Playboy magazine, and
To be
Kudos
found.
to you
I'm
on
so
your
glad we've got that clarified.
strong trivia skills, Jason. But I still think you should have played dumb on this one.
right. So
We found out later this is the issue that Jason found in the woods
right.
at a very important time in his youth.
That's hilarious. The idea of finding a 30-year-old, like, if you're a Playboy. But okay. Anyway, thing is, Belle goes up. They've cast a very mature-looking teenager. The Belle goes off.
Mature. So what you're saying is filled out,
Sure.
full figured, even, you know, a womanly body.
You can comment on the womanliness of the gymnast's body. I'm just saying that a very sweaty looking Michael Landon sort of loses his cool and totally
The way
attacks
you
this
might if you were in the presence of a Playboy model.
I guess so. If you were an out of control 16-year-old or whatever he is, you know, whatever age he's supposed to be, and
Or a 40-something talk show. I mean,
right.
podcast.
So here's what's interesting. He slaughters this girl, and by the way, it's a violent scene. There's no blood. There's no blood in this entire movie, but he does slaughter this girl. Everybody sees it. Everybody sees a werewolf wearing Michael Landon's clothes run away, and everybody immediately is like, they were like, "Who did it?" And they're like, "I don't know how, but it was Michael Landon." You know,
It was Tony. Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. Nobody's like, nobody's like, it was a monster wearing Tony's clothes. It was like, oh no, it was Tony.
Yeah.
I'm kind of into that that everybody's very like, well, Tony turned into a monster and ate this girl.
Right.
And I like how, like, on board the police are, and like almost everybody immediately starts calling him a werewolf
That's
too.
awesome.
Like they're like in like an older werewolf movie, even like one as early as like the 40s, just from a decade before this, there would be a lot of hand wringing about
Yes.
whether or not there actually were werewolves. Not here, man. They don't got time for that. They're like, this
Yeah.
guy turned into a werewolf. He's eating Playboy models, and we got to shut this down.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
something that's weird about previous to this, in the YouTube video that I watched, the part where the janitor is talking about the werewolf, all of
Yeah.
that, the audio just turns like down
Mm.
and gets really low, and it's got this echo effect. And
Yeah.
so you miss, he's very passionate about describing the werewolf, and it has fangs and stuff like that. But all that audio is munched for some reason on that. It was really weird. He gives this great dialogue, and then it comes in full volume with the cop going, "Wow, okay," or something like it was such a really weird. I'm really unsure why that his whole dialogue, his whole very important thing about
Yeah.
werewolves in that particular version just has this weird audio problem. But only
Well, I
for his
wonder.
thing. Very
I
strange.
mean, Vladimir Sokolov is playing the janitor. It may be that he is looping his dialogue and they just looped it very poorly. I don't
No,
know.
I don't think it. I don't think that's it. I can't imagine that. I mean, that's not an artifact. You like that wouldn't make any sense that would ever be
That's really
anything
funny.
but
I
in
have
the.
no explanation for that. I agree with you. Thank you for putting your finger on it because I remember having a hard time quite following what the guy was saying. It didn't dawn on me, but you said it right that it sounds weird. The whole thing sounds weird in that scene.
Well, it just
Um,
drops like to a quarter the volume, and you hear like as if there was supposed to be a vocal effect. Again, come on, people, give us a Blu-ray, please.
yeah, yeah. It may well
I,
just be
I
the
mean,
poor transfer.
I couldn't find a VHS copy this time around, and we'd already decided. I always try to support my local video store, or goodness knows we've rented tons of things from Amazon or Vulcan or I Love Video or any of that. But just seeing weird stuff like that, it was very strange. Although I didn't go back to watch the MST version to see if his audio is intact on that. I'm only guessing it probably was.
I don't remember per se. So I didn't notice this as much as you mentioned it, but I do remember that I did have a hard time following him. So, the character also has that doesn't help. The character has a thick accent. He's clearly super worked up, because he's worried that there's a werewolf out there attacking people. Um, Guy Williams, who will later be Zorro and will also be Dr. Robinson on Lost in Space, is interviewing him. And this guy will turn up a couple times. These are also moments when I feel like the movie is trying to pad out its running time because a lot of time is spent with this guy explaining the legacy of the werewolf, and likewise, we spent all that time with the rock and roll song in the clubhouse. So the movie is 76 minutes long, and you get the impression that if not for some of this padding, the movie would be about an hour, and they definitely needed it to be, to be the right length.
Sure.
So yeah, so at this point, he's killed several people. Michael Landon is now the main, he's the suspect. The police are looking for him. The friendly police officer who showed up early to sort of point Michael Landon towards Dr. Brandon, I think that's the name of the Whit Bissell character.
Despite his using jive talk.
Right. Yeah, yet another stock character, which is the lovable police officer, police detective who knows the troubles of the youth and wants to help them. That character shows up here. Anyway, he's involved. He's worried that it's Tony and that Tony's going to get killed. And the movie wraps up fairly quickly because, like I said, there's not much movie here. Because after this, you have the all points bulletin. There's a stakeout, and we finally have Michael Landon find his way back to Whit Bissell's lab, And Whit Bissell immediately goes, "Oh yeah, come in, don't worry, we'll take care of you," and then knocks him out. And it's such an abusive relationship. It's so incredibly disturbing because he knocks him out, and he says to his TV's Frank, "Grab your camera. I'm going to make him turn into a werewolf. We're going to film this for posterity." And
What a
luckily
jackass.
right, but luckily he's a moron because this is a terrible idea. Truly, he didn't even like tie him down or anything. He's it's a just a tremendously dumb idea. He's because he goes, "Okay, Tony, wake up and be a werewolf," and Tony hulks out, and immediately like the phone rings. Bells somewhere near Tony's head always set off his berserker rage, and so he slaughters Whit Bissell and his assistant, and also destroys the camera.
I
Um,
love. There's a part in this scene where he's coming at the mad scientist, and he's got all this like foam
yeah,
coming out of his mouth, like he's a rabid dog. And
yeah,
I love that. Like like you never really saw anything like that in a werewolf movie, prior to this. It just seems so animalistic. And I remember when I first saw this movie as a kid being really freaked out by that part.
Oh, sure.
yeah.
It's done really well.
Yeah. No, it's a the funny thing is it's a pretty neat vision of a monster. Um, because
And,
yeah,
this is the makeup that, definitely is used in Teen Wolf, which again may be part of what Julia is reacting to. Because a lot of the I was a teenage this, or a lot of the teen movies of this horror genre are fairly campy and B movie. And then out of that makeup comes Teen Wolf, which is, obviously a comedy.
yeah,
So I could see why coming into it, you would expect like, oh, there's a lot of these movies that are cheesy. I've also seen Teen Wolf. Oh, holy crap! This is way darker and more
yeah.
disturbing than expected. I found that I knew it was a little bit more serious, but I do agree that it was darker than I had remembered it from seeing it years and years ago.
Um, I feel like a lot of these AIP movies were pretty. They're often how else to put it? That they can be schlocky, but often they are pretty serious. I mean, The Head That
Right.
Wouldn't Die is a pretty straight movie, and at times like super shocking. And likewise, I don't remember much at all about I Was a Teenage Frankenstein, but I have a feeling that it's much the same tone. These are not super goofy movies. The way that like Corman doing his racing pictures and stuff like that, those were goofy, and I actually, since I generally prefer the things to take themselves a little more seriously, I'm happier in the universe that we are here. So that works out for me okay. Anyway, Michael Landon has like 30 seconds to live. He after killing the mad scientist and his assistant, he heads to the door. The cops come in, and the cops shoot him dead because the werewolf can be killed with regular bullets because he's not magic, and that's the end.
Yeah, that just makes me super sad.
The cop
It is
goes,
a
"Well,
sad ending.
yeah, yeah." He says,
And
"'Twas beauty killed the beast."
it
I'm
is
sorry, go ahead.
abrupt, but again, like I do feel like that is kind of I wish it wasn't as abrupt, but that is the genre. I mean, poor Larry Talbot had to
Yeah.
die every single movie, only to be
Yeah,
resurrected the next film. And
absolutely.
even the end of American Werewolf in London, which is at times comedic, is still very downbeat.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, the werewolf dies. That's just the way it is. The Frankenstein monster, frankly, most of the time dies, or at least gets buried in something, and only to come back. In my mind, this is just how monster movies end. Even if you like the monster, they tend to get killed or appear to
But
get
see, the
killed.
thing is, what bothers me about it is that I feel like, and this is just me being used to happy endings, I guess. I
Go
feel
crazy.
like there should have been a thing where they get rid, the scientist goes bye, and they find his video, and it didn't get destroyed. So they go, oh wow, he did this. Is there a way to undo it? Oh hey, look here in his notes, he talks about how to undo it, and now we save Tony, and he's able to come back. That's what I
But
would like to have seen.
that's you wanting a happy ending. That's not
Right.
necessarily the ending this movie should have.
I know, but I'm just saying that's why it bothers me, because
Yeah.
it's still not a happy ending, because obviously people have died. Tony's life is probably not going to ever be the same, and that scientist dude is, dead. But I mean, I guess that's a happy ending. But anyway, but I just feel like if you can have it be, or at the very least, like I said, have his reputation be saved, because they find the notes, or they find the video, or
Well, I'm
whatever.
sure
of
they
the mad
the
scientist.
police probably will search this doctor's laboratory
Yeah.
and probably find his deep and detailed studies into werewolf anatomy.
And
And
honestly,
Yeah.
probably a lot of other really crazy experiments that we don't even know about, to be honest.
Horrible. Yeah. True.
But
True.
but
You
the
didn't
thing
see
that
like the kid who regressed into a hamster and the
yeah,
Mhm.
right.
I was a teenage gerbil.
yeah.
God,
That
you
was
can
Yeah.
just
freaky.
imagine all kinds of things. He probably has like he's probably got head that wouldn't die kind of stuff going on with like somebody's severed head that he's brought back to life and is running around on little Barbie legs. I mean, there's
Yeah,
probably
that
all
dude
kinds
definitely
of
needed to die.
yeah.
In my imagination, this guy's a Nazi doctor that ran to America after the war.
Yeah.
Mhm.
His real name is like Von Klackenstein or something
Right.
like that.
Sure.
Right. There is such a character in the Flesh Eaters, actually. These sort of on the run Nazi scientists who are doing experiments over here. You know, it, I think
Well,
what's
and the thing is,
really go ahead.
we've talked about in the past. Sorry, we've talked about in the past that that this time period is not so far removed from World War II, and so yeah, a lot of this probably is just a nod to all how effed up the tests were that they did.
Yes. Well, I
I'm
mean,
sure.
American, yeah, and the Americans did plenty, certainly psychological tests all the time, on soldiers, usually just to find out, how they could handle stress and whatever. What's we've seen in other movies about assassins, the idea that you take a troubled kid and what you make of them is a killing machine tool. But it is tragic here, most of all, because we follow Michael Landon before it happens to him. That's
Right.
amazing, and to me,
You
that
can see
is
what he could have been.
yeah, yeah, and the innocent people who care for him, who end up not getting anything out of that. Yes, Tony is abusive and angry, but with help, he might have turned into a wonderful person. And that's just not what's going to happen here. It's so that's amazing. Okay, let's get our final thoughts, and then go into whatever we have to endorse. So I think we started with Julia, who was the biggest detractor of the movie. So what are your final thoughts about I Was a Teenage Werewolf?
Well, I mean, so I've already talked plenty about what I didn't like about it. So yeah, I do want to say though that I do think absolutely Michael Landon is brilliant. I think he's very believable as all the parts of this character. I think the adults are great in terms of just feeling like you said, the ones who care seem like they care. The ones who are abusive are horrible. So I think all of that is very well done. There's some stupid stuff that I didn't care for, but it's not worth kind of getting into in detail because it's just part of this kind of film, I guess. But so yeah, I think it's very well made, and I think if it doesn't bother you to see people messed with in this way. And like I say, sometimes it wouldn't. I think it was just the mood I was in because I've been around teenagers and kids, and it just didn't. The idea of kids being abused this way just was really bothering me. So I think I
Hmm.
just wasn't in the right place, in the right mindset to enjoy the film. But it's a good movie.
I think that's a wonderful observation. Who did we go to next? Was it Drew or was it Tony? It
It
was
was
Tony
Tony.
next. Tony, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I like this movie. Again, I wish there was a better print that I could obtain. It's cool seeing, young Michael Landon kind of taking the stage and he was always a really solid performer. So seeing an early film of his full of teenage angst is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of great bits with the teenagers, and they point out all the jive talk that they have, and it's very much 57. Yeah, I like the movie, and of course, like we said before, the makeup is really great and often imitated later. If you have a more human werewolf, if it takes more of a human form, it's usually closer to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Than perhaps the Universal one even. Post this movie, people go, "Oh, that's how that would look if you had a more humanistic werewolf."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's a little uneven here and there, but I think that's not a huge detraction. Depending on if you're into black and white horror movies from the 50s, if you're willing to take the plunge, I don't think that's going to bother you as much.
Yeah. Wonderful. Drew, what are your thoughts?
I really liked revisiting this, and and even though Julia didn't like it, I think that it resulted into a really good discussion. And I think that I would actually like, even though we had got Teen Wolf in the 80s, I actually wouldn't mind seeing this remade. I think you could do an interesting stuff with this idea now. Although I guess since the rights are in limbo, Lord knows, who could actually do that. But I think this is a cool movie, and I'm looking forward to doing Teenage Frankenstein. I again always love talking about a werewolf movie. I love that as a genre. So this was a good time for me.
I mean, you could do it without having to call it that. The idea certainly isn't copyrighted. So if you wanted to do something of a troubled youth, it becomes in fact, it's been done. The question is how much could you make it into an homage that you would be satisfied with it, or would you not be satisfied unless you could call it I Was a Teenage Werewolf?
Or you could make it were-teens, where it's a series of a bunch of werewolves who then morphs into angsty teen, and every parent's just like, "Oh, I've seen that before."
Yep.
Oh no, werewolf's now a teenager. It's much more terrible than we imagined.
I mean, we've even got that's I love that. I mean, especially the hormonal stuff and the sweatiness. I mean, by the way, this is just right before Michael Landon was on Bonanza, because this is 1957. Michael Landon goes on to Bonanza in 1959, and will stick around, and he'll be 23 when he goes on Bonanza. He'll exit that show when he's 35 years old. In other words, he'll go from a kid to like dad character by the time he leaves. And he leaves Bonanza, and then he just sort of gets on a circular platform and steps back off into Little House on the Prairie, and he stays there for like a decade. And he gets off Little House on the Prairie, and he spins around, and he gets onto Highway to Heaven, and he stays there until he dies. I mean, that's the amazing thing, is that basically you're looking at an actor who never stopped working until he was dead. Basically, he died in 1991. Highway to Heaven ended in 1989, but pretty close to. There was never a moment from this moment when there wasn't Michael Landon in our lives. It's so beautiful to see him here. He's really a strong performer, very understated. He doesn't overact, this is a part that's definitely prone to overacting. He's good. It's cool to see him. He was young. He was in his 50s when he died. It's very, very sad. I got nothing else. This has been a really fun one to talk about. Let's do our endorsements, and then before we do that, I should just say this is going to be very cool. Whatever we didn't think of to mention about I Was a Teenage Werewolf, we will bring it up as we discuss I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and Blood of Dracula, which are basically all part of the same universe of troubled youth turning into classic monsters. Love it. Okay, Tony, what do you have to endorse for us this week?
Well, the new Godzilla anime is out on Netflix. Part 2. Part 1 left us with a cliffhanger, which has been months in the making of me wanting to kind of see that. So definitely recommend that. Man, there was something else, and now I'm totally drawing a blank, which sucks. Oh, I did want to say, as part of this, I started watching more stuff. I highly recommend, if you're using Amazon Prime and you start delving into obscure movies, to just take that plunge and start skipping through, because it led me to some just weirdo spy movies recently, like from other countries. Strange, possibly ripped from VHS spy movies. In addition, of course, like I've mentioned several times before, all the martial arts movies. But if you start down this rabbit hole, it starts, the breadth of the video catalog now on Amazon is such that you can get into just weird territory. And I think that's pretty amazing. That, and I've been watching this Sentai Gingaman, because Shout Factory keeps getting the rights to all of these Sentai shows, which a lot of them became different Power Rangers shows, where they changed the villains for American actors and changed the heroes, and then just cut back in basically the fight sequences. But seeing these shows, I just finished Car Rangers, which was kind of lower budget, it felt like. But I just love all the weird, bizarre. I often just put them on while I'm, doing stuff. And it's a cool, crazy trip through, kids shows from Japan, and the differences between kids shows here is pretty big. Gingaman has like crazy, they controlled these beasts like a gorilla and a dragon and a cat. And of course, they turn into combiner robots, and all of the enemies are these weird pirate-themed enemies who are trying to take over the world, complete with weird, strange villains that have these like orange suits and this kind of strange painted-on Van Dyke looking. The villains are super weird. These like stripy shorts. They're like the fodder villains. It's really bizarre and fun to see these like Sentai shows, because I was too old. I wanted to see these when I was old enough, when Power Rangers came out. My brother and sister were younger, so they were into it, or my brother at least. But I just want to see these shows. So it didn't really work for me, but now I'm able to go back and, for better or worse, watch Japanese kid shows that meant for 8 to 10-year-olds as an adult, and just marvel at how weird and cool and crazy these things were at the time.
I approve of that. Julia, did we get your endorsements? I don't think we did.
No, I'm not a Playmate of the Month, so I got overlooked.
Ow!
Nice.
Man.
Burn.
I'm kidding. No, I really can't. I couldn't think of anything. I mean, I've seen a couple things that are good. Ant-Man and the Wasp is fun, and I watched.
Really fun.
I watched I, Tonya on Netflix or whatever it was, one of those, and that was really interesting. A lot better than I thought it was going to be, honestly. But there's nothing I'm super passionate about, so I think I'm just going to say that either one of those would be not a waste of time, but it's not going to be like, I'm not going to go on at length, because they're both just kind of what you think they are.
You're not excited that the Orville is coming back? That's a trailer.
Yeah, but that's not an endorsement. That's looking forward to. I'm also looking forward to Mission Impossible.
Yeah, there you go.
Big time.
All right, Drew, what do you got for us?
Several things. First off, I recommend that every person who listens to this podcast this week go and find a way to listen to the great Cramps song "I Was the Teenage Werewolf."
Oh my God,
goes so well, with this movie. As far as endorsements, I have a couple of things. First off, go get Shudder, go on to Shudder, start watching The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs.
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that's part of what I was. Yes,
the film series that broke the internet. I have been watching it. I've been skipping around. I haven't been watching the marathon in order.
How many episodes are there? Tell me more about. How does this work?
Right? Yeah.
It was a live stream on Shudder on Friday the 13th, but apparently there was too many people trying to watch it at once, and it caused problems with Shudder. It is now all available for however long it's up, which I don't have a real answer for, unfortunately, but you can watch it. You can go to their TV channel, their original programming, and it's in there is The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs. There's 13 movies.
That's right.
Wow.
As Joe Bob describes them, the best movies that Shudder could afford.
Yes.
And, I have watched so far Demons, and I watched I just finished yesterday The Legend of Boggy Creek, which was amazing, especially with for me, I've always liked that movie a lot because of its regional feel, because that really feels more like the Texas that, even though it takes place in Arkansas, that really feels more like the environment that I grew up around. And so I find there's something, a regionalness that I find very relatable. And apparently Joe Bob spent some time in that part of the country as a kid, and so his enthusiasm is really up in that movie. I'm about to dive into both Hellraiser and Reanimator, and from what I understand, the Hellraiser episode is really great. But I think the whole thing is it's just great. I love Joe Bob Briggs. It's funny, like Jamie, who is not overly, she's heard me talk about him, but she's not overly, she didn't have TNT as a kid. She never saw Monster Vision. Lord, I'm sure she never had the movie channel, but she stuck her head in the room while I was watching it. You know, she's heard me, I'm sure, talk about Joe Bob, but she was like, I feel like I understand you so much more now. This is clearly the person you've patterned your entire life on.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm paraphrasing, but I just was like, yes, my wife knows me very, very well. The other thing, my other endorsement, other than again, it's just so good to have Joe Bob Briggs back. Scooby Natural, which is on Netflix. It is a crossover between Supernatural and Scooby-Doo, and it is also glorious. And it may have actually, after over a decade, it knocked off the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical episode as my favorite high concept episode of a genre TV show, because this thing is such a studied, affectionate parody of all things Scooby-Doo, while still being a pitch perfect episode of Supernatural. And it's animated almost the entire time too. So you can watch that on Netflix. So those are my two endorsements. Also, though, I will echo what Tony said. That Godzilla trailer is really good. So if you haven't seen it, that you should go on YouTube.
Oh yeah, see that, but then also the latest Godzilla, like 3D animated.
I have not seen either one of the animes because I'm on the fence about it, because you like them, but Matt Frank seemed lukewarm on the first one, and so
I know why. I can't. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's the best thing ever. If you like Godzilla, there's a lot worse than that.
I'll probably get around to watching them, because the King of the Monsters trailer put me in a big Godzilla mood. So I'll probably break down and finally watch those now.
Yeah, I mean, I watch it for my job. We're making 3D animated stuff that looks 2D, so I watch all of that. You know. But so far, one of the best ones, even better than the Godzilla one, has been Batman Ninja. Man,
I heard that was very
good. It's so good. Like, it's so ridiculous. It's every anime trope possible. It doesn't do anything that you haven't maybe seen before, but it does it with such glee that I really dig it. But Jason, so I am gonna piggyback on Drew. So Max, some people may know, he's on the show, really good friend of ours. Writes horror stuff, lives horror as well. Was kind of giving me guff because I was really busy trying to take the weekend to do music stuff, try to get Deserts of Mars back on track. And he's like, why aren't you watching this Joe Bob Briggs thing? So I went over to his house and I caught the last half of Hellraiser. And that was amazing. He told me some of the stuff from the rest, and the fact that they put it up. Everybody, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm kind of guessing you're of a similar mindset, and just at least pay for Shudder for the month and go check this out. Because
you don't even need to. There's a 7-day free trial.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, whatever it takes. Like I like giving people money. Sorry, Drew. But
sure.
No, they're doing another round of this. This was so popular. This was supposed to be Joe Bob Briggs's retirement thing.
Yeah.
This was so popular. They're doing at least one more marathon. So the drive-in
So
truly will
wait,
never
are you
die.
telling me that Joe Bob Briggs did this marathon on Shudder as a retirement party, and it was popular
Yes.
enough that he has unretired? That
Yes.
is the best thing I ever heard. That is that is really great. I've never
And
seen such a quick bounce back from a retirement before. That is
Well, I mean,
fantastic.
think of how many farewell tours, say, I don't know, Kiss has had,
Kiss.
maybe.
Yeah, baby. Yes.
if we can have
But
upteen million Kiss farewell tours, I want at least
Yeah. 6, 7
5,
Joe Bob
6.
retirement
Yeah,
parties at
yeah,
least, yeah.
yeah,
yes.
But
but
so I love the Shutter guys. We've actually had them on the show, and so if you're not even sure, go and do the 7-day free trial and then stick around if you love it. But they put that up there so that you can try their service out. I know I will. I have I have not watched the Joe Bob cycle. I really need to. I guess that I'm going to make that part of my life. That sounds good.
this is great. Like I agree with Max for giving me guff, and then I'm very happy. I mean, I had to do what I had to do and try to get all my music and
Yeah.
everything else in order. I had this past weekend to do that. The fact that Shudder put that up so we could all catch back up is amazing, because I've heard nothing but good things about his commentary.
So many people come back after years of not doing something, and like Joe Bob has always been kind of around, but he hasn't been on TV in a while, and so many people try to come back and they cannot recapture the feel. Like this, he is like he looks older obviously, but this still has that feel that I got when I was watching Monster Vision as a kid. And the
Sure.
best part is, because it's not on TNT now, the movies are unedited.
Right.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. You remember? Well, you know what? I won't waste time. I know we've gone long, but we'll talk about Joe Bob some more next time. So my endorsement, well, honestly, one of them was the Cramps. I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I'm such a surf guitar freak that I love that song. I love the reverb. It sounds so great. It is a great song, and I just I can't get enough of it. The other thing I wanted to, we've been busy. I haven't watched a lot, but I did finish Mysterious Island by Jules Verne, and because I'm researching it because I'm on sort of a Captain Nemo kick lately. And Mysterious Island is the coolest thing because it is absolutely nothing like any movie that was ever based on Mysterious Island. But if you want to know, like, everything that Jules Verne thought that he knew about science gets put into this book, because it's about like 5 guys who get lost in a balloon and crash land on the Pacific without any tools and only the clothes on their back. And by the time they're done, they've like learned to make iron tools, and they've built a coal cart and a boat, and they're diverting rivers with nitroglycerin that they make out of things that they find in the ground. It's amazing, and all of this just comes from Jules Verne deciding to share with you every single thing he knows about how everything is made. It was wonderful, and I really enjoyed it. So I don't know, Mysterious Island. That's what I got. And I'm definitely going to watch the Joe Bob series. So that's our discussion of I Was a Teenage Werewolf. We will be back in 2 weeks with I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. And I cannot wait to compare and contrast that movie with its mad scientist is none other than Whit Bissell, the same mad scientist that we had in this movie. I'm very excited to deal with that. So everybody, we will hear from you soon. If you want to talk more about I Was a Teenage Werewolf, come to the Facebook page. Let us know what you think, and it's going to be a fun summer. So thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Take care.
Night.
Awesome. Night. Bye.